System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Tuesday, June 23rd. I am Amin TMK alongside Amoja, Lil Tanky, Sumler Amoja. Hello. Happy Tuesday. It's going up on a Tuesday. How are you living? How have you been? I've been meaning to say this. I'm going to put up some pictures and stuff on our Patreon. You know, we went camping. We did a little survival stuff. Very fun. Was able to bring along some of our friends.
Got to keep the tribe strong and trained up.
I feel like Denzel Caldwell, friend of the show, would have been so proud of us. I think we got to get him on the show soon again. But how have you been doing since then? And how are you doing now?
Man, just relaxed, refreshed. You know what I'm saying? I'm a city boy, but I'm a country boy too. I just got to get out to the wild every now and again and get muddy, get filthy.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. You know, you've been spending a lot. You've spent a lot of time in the South and in the country. And of course, I was born in West Virginia, Logan, West Virginia, small town.
You from a smaller town than me, y'all. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you know, the conversation surrounding the mountain ranges in the United States was a fun one during our trip to our campsite. Okay. Enough about us. You want to talk about some geopolitics, some fun things?
Let's get into it.
So, okay, I don't have a slide right now, but I just want to say that Keir Starmer, your friend, not mine, announced his resignation.
Crying and shit.
UK to get sixth prime minister in 7 years. Just kind of your initial thoughts. This is coming in right after he implemented the ban for 16 and under to have access to social media, the voter ID thing, basically a few days after Resigns. Your initial thoughts?
That was always his job, to get that over the finish line. You know what I'm saying? It had been an old agenda, something that they had wanted to make happen for quite some time, and they were always looking for the way to get it across, right? And what it really is a voter ID. You know, they if you're online, they want to know what pages you're going on. You know, they don't want any anonymity, you know, so that they can really kind of track dissent. Hard to get that across. And quote unquote freedom loving Europe, you know, social liberties loving England. So how do you have to package? You have to package it like a child protection program. Well, you know, if you're under, 16, you know, you can't be on social media if you're under a certain age. So now you got to prove it, right? So what a beautiful backdoor way, as if, you know, this dude who is associated with the Epstein scandal has any type of real care, right, about children's safety, was tied up in one of the 43 scandals associated with Keir Starmer in his brief time as the prime minister was the Mendelsohn affair, who definitely is listed prominently throughout the Epstein list.
Unlike in America, you actually have to resign for stuff like that.
Right.
There's actually consequences.
And he had been wild for a long time. I mean, we're talking about a person with a 40% disapproval rating and only a 29% approval rating. Far more people disapprove of you, right? You know, in those polls, I think you're doing a good job. Agree. Don't care, strongly disagree, right? He's all strongly disagree. You know, is Keir Starmer good for social, for national security? Strongly disagree. Is Keir Starmer doing a good job, you know, improving the life station of the average British person? Strongly disagree. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are no real fans of him. And the sad thing about it, right? I think it's too easy because a lot of people are going to want to be like, oh, it's the Zelensky curse. Oh, we had plenty of problems. Zelensky was like one of them, you know, because again, you're supposed to be the voice of change, right? All of this Ukrainian stuff pops off, and you have Boris Johnson, you know, with moppy ass crazy hair, you know, and just getting, you know, Zelensky ready to sign the treaty in Istanbul. He flies out there and he's like, nah, don't do it. You know, he gets caught up, you know, he gets sent off. Then we get Liz Truss for like a week or two. You know what I'm saying? Then we got Rishi Sunak, my bad. Sumac is a delicious spice or a poisonous herb, depending on how you see it in the wild, right? And these are three
information.
Right? These are three conservative leaders, right? And everybody's like, okay, all these conservatives, they're just going to keep it going. They're going to keep it going with this Ukraine thing. So maybe if we get a labor leader in there, we'll get some change. We get Keir Starmer, who, by the way, came up in the whole, what was his name? They loved this guy. He was the darling he was supposed to be even to the left of Bernie Sanders. His name escapes me right now. Jeremy Corbyn, right? He came up in his administration and it was kind of his job to kind of sabotage him. And he did, you know. He's always been kind of like an Israeli kind of sleeper dude, you know, Israel first. And so, you know, you get this illusion of changing and nothing changes. You know, once again, as liberals do, you know, they fuck it all up. You know, everyone's hoping for them to be something different from the conservative government that they're trying to replace. And here goes this guy with just more of the same. Instead, you know, he's now, you know, people are getting arrested for, you know, disliking Zelensky post in Britain. You know, people are getting arrested for saying, you know, from the river to the sea. You know, charging protesters literally as terrorists. Like this is happening under Keir Starmer. All of these attacks on free speech, right? So once again, this dude that was supposed to be a reprieve from the conservative government ends up to once again just be more of the same, you know, and it just goes to the total capture of electoral politics in the West, because we got to hear about what a terrible person Putin is and how he's this dictator, right? But Putin's favorability rating never drops below 50%. It's normally somewhere between 50 and 70%. Meanwhile, if we're looking at, you know, any of these Western leaders, Emmanuel Macron right now has a approval rating of 18 to 19%. Frederick Merz,
how is he still involved?
Right?
How is he? I thought he was voted out last year,
right?
And there was supposed to be a whole parliament change, or the left won. Yet he sticks around, man.
He sticks around. You know, Merz over in Germany, he's sitting around with a 19% approval rating. And Keir Starmer had the highest out of them at 27%, right? These are terrible ratings.
These would be unacceptable three-point shooting percentages.
They would say that this is not the will of the democracy. More people dislike you than like you. How in the hell are you the prime minister, right? So, like, you know, all of this democracy stuff, it has to be taken with a grain of salt. And we're seeing that in Colombia, you know. But, you know, we'll get there. But, you know, just talking about all of these things with Merz. This is a person that not a year ago was busted with, 3 Ukrainian escort male.
Keir Starmer.
Starmer, right? Yeah.
Like that whole scandal.
And they blamed it on the Russians. It's like, bro, you got 3 Ukrainian dancing boys up at, you know, the palace.
So salacious, man.
You know, once again, right? Who cares, right?
But they're involved. Again, like you said, Mendelsohn is involved in the Epstein list. Then you have all of these Ukrainian sex workers, which is a huge part of what Ukraine exports. This is true. If you want to look up the Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, okay, one of the biggest pimps in all of the world, this is what they do. And of course, Keir Starmer was going to be involved in it. And, you know, this is not something that, you know, we are shocked to see, because as Professor Morandi said, this is the Epstein class. And it goes not just in the United States, it goes all over the West. So we have all those things happening, right? Yet, I want to show you this. 3 Storm Shadows Scalp EG cruise missiles hit Russia's VZPPS Enterprise in Voronezh yesterday. I'm sure I'm butchering that. The VZPPS design manufactures discrete semiconductors, integrated circuits, and power modules, supplying the components to hundreds of enterprises in Russia. How about this from Glenn Deason? Get done on there. The day Starmer resigned, he approves strikes on Russia's Voronezh region with storm shadows. Will they cry unprovoked when Russia retaliates against Britain? So no matter what you have in terms of your prime ministership, it looks like it's still business as usual when it comes to this interest in destabilizing Russia. And when whoever is going to be replaced in the UK Parliament as prime minister is going to be pro Ukraine and is going to look to push into Russia.
Yeah, so I'm looking at actual statistics right now for different politicians in Britain. You have Kimby Badenoch. You have Ed Davey, Nigel Farage. Some of you guys have heard about him. Big right-wing guy. You have Zach Belansky. And you have Keir Starmer. Out of all of those people, Keir Starmer has literally the least favorable ratings, right? So like out of all of these other major politicians, that goes to show you this is the kind of person that shouldn't be making the decisions, okay, that can lead to World War III. Now, we've been having this conversation on Inner City Left for a while, how long Zelensky has been trying to get cruise missiles. First, he went to the United States under Biden, famously. Old general told him no. The Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, told him no, just use drones. The drones were having a great deal of success and really still are, just due to the economics of drones and drone warfare. Even though the destructive capability is much smaller compared to a missile, the economics of it are much more favorable. But you keep going down the food chain. You got to know from there. Secretary of State Blinken told him yes. And then there was a tussle. And then, Biden eventually told him no. So he didn't get, the tomahawks that he wanted from America. Waited for the president to change. Went to Trump. Trump once again told him no tomahawks. First he said yes. Then they had the whole Anchorage meeting with the Russians. And then he told him no. Right. So this is once again Zelensky just not taking a no, So where'd he go? He went to Britain, and now he's got Keir Starmer, a dude who's already on the way out and wildly unpopular, does not have the edict of the people, doesn't have the mandate of the people, doesn't even have the approval of the people, and he grants them these ballistic missiles. Now, the thing to remember, a cruise missile, but the thing to remember about any missile strike into a country is you're telegraphing, I could have nuked you, right? When you're talking about a missile technology from a nuclear power. Britain is a nuclear power. Ukraine isn't, but these weapons are coming directly from Britain, And so this is Britain's way of telegraphing that we can hit Russia whenever. And that goes back to what Glenn Deason is saying. It's like, how long, right? Because we've talked about this again on Inner City Left. We've talked about the Iranification of the Russian defense posture, right? Where they've adjusted their techniques. And the thing that's missing in all of this is, yes, it's true. It is incredibly embarrassing for Russia that one of their drone sites, and I think they made like booster fuels, things for their military, were hit by this missile and destroyed. And it shows the weaknesses of missile defense, which again, we've said continuously, missile defense is an illusion. The best you can do is missile deterrence, right? You can always overwhelm a surface-to-area missile battery just with volume, electronic warfare, lots of different ways. The best you can do is try to make it harder to get hit with missiles. But while that happened, never forget that there will be a response from the Russians, and it doesn't change the material facts on the ground. While they were busy hitting, that site with the missile, a Storm Shadow, a very powerful British missile, the Russians took Konstantinivka, right? So, there was Pokrovsk, and then right across from that was Konstantinivka. Most people don't know where these cities are, but these are huge cities in Ukraine. These are like the last little obstacles that remain
Yeah, they're
for the
strategically
Russians.
important as well because they are, they have the buttressing. They're the ones that
Mhm.
actually have the defenses. So when these cities start to collapse, there's just way more of this free open space until you get to Kyiv, and these cities are the last lines of defense
Yeah.
in Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, you can ask the Israelis, what's the difference between hitting a target and holding a target? The Israelis can
They're
hit
having a
pretty
hard
much.
time with that in Lebanon right now.
Absolutely. They can hit almost anything in Lebanon, but they cannot hold it, right? The Russians are taking cities. They're not hitting buildings, they're taking cities, and they're moving closer to their stated
And they're
objectives.
holding them for years.
And they don't go back. Big cities don't go back. Not since like the offensive of 2023 have we seen any major city reversals. That just does not happen. And so there you are. So these things look bad for Russia, except for the fact that it looks bad only because the Russians continue to show restraint, even though they have more and more elevated what happens in their responses. You hit a Russian bridge, they hit 2 Ukrainian bridges. They had hesitated to do those kind of maneuvers before, but watching again the successes of the Iranian military, you can see that they're already making adaptations to their war strategy.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, the response from the Russians is going to be on the way. And I think that, again, they've already discussed how tired they are with this kind of behavior. And you wonder, like, at what point is Europe also going to face some sort of military action, especially when they continue to move with this Kaya Kallas vibe, of, hey, we're going to destabilize Russia at all costs. And, we're going to defend Ukraine at all costs when Ukraine in of itself is pretty much collapsing as a country. It's collapsing as a culture. The calls for Zelensky's resignation and the elections to happen are getting louder and louder. When you see the henchman gank pull up squad, the guys in the vans who snatch up your 23-year-old or your 50 23-year-old son or your 54-year-old dad with a gimp leg and just pulling them out while dogs are biting your ankles. I mean, we talk about obviously ICE in the United States, man, but that's how it is out there. You just get pulled from your home and sent to the front lines. So the manpower and just the morale in general of the Ukrainian fighting force is way down. And you want, obviously, there to be some sort of peace negotiation that can end this. That's what Donald Trump said in first 24 hours, we're going to end the war. But yet we still have it here. Yeah.
And all of this goes back to why these European politicians are deeply, deeply unpopular. Again, the fact that British people are being asked to sacrifice the social expectations, right? The contract that we have with the government. Oh, we're going to provide, heating relief. We're going to have medical services. We're going to do these things that we, the government, promise to you, the citizen. And those social services are being impacted by this continuous support for a country that has no chance of winning, and no matter who comes in, it's the same story. Oh, we have to send it to Ukraine. Oh, the Russians are going to attack us, without saying we're doing incredibly provocative actions that one day probably will lead the Russians to have a response. See, and that's what Deason is saying. I just want to follow it up with this Glenn Greenwald quote. Sir Keir Starmer resigned as UK Prime Minister because he was one of the most hated politicians in modern history.
Wow.
The public scorn was deserved. He's a standard center-left institutionalist striver with zero fixed beliefs and an endless capacity for self-deceit. That's fucking scathing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Glenn Greenwald is hardly some radical lefty communist,
But it's definitely easy to see when, the information is so in front of your face. I want to pivot a little bit. You mentioned it earlier, and I think it's important. We just had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful broadcast with Vanessa Torres. I hope folks who haven't been able to see it go back and check it out. You can learn a lot of context about Colombia and South America in terms of leftist movements out there. But unfortunately, we got to talk about this far right millionaire, Alberto, I'm killing this name. Abelardo de la Espriella wins Colombia's presidential runoff. Left-wing opponents allege vote count irregularities after Trump endorsed lawyer secures narrow majority. I believe this is pretty much official, as 96.7 or 99.7% of the vote is there. Obviously, there's always going to be allegations of was this election rigged? There's already been conversation if Israel was a part of it. Israel's been very busy in South America. They have been for quite some time now. I wanted to get your thoughts on Espriella winning and, kind of just your general thoughts on this, I guess. And you're muted.
Boom. Sorry about that.
Okay.
It wasn't that long ago that there was a scandal in France where they talked about there was an Israeli private influence firm that it alleged that it interfered in 30 different elections to make sure that far left candidates were disenfranchised, right? And this is one of the things that Petro was talking about, that there were IP spoofing that was happening for a lot of the voting machines, which is supposed to be on a closed IP circuit. So there's no real reason why IP addresses should be changing. That in and of itself is kind of an indication of malfeasance. And this just goes back to, again, what we run into over and over again. I find it ironic because Pedro was one of the loudest voices, him and Lula, criticizing Maduro, saying, oh, don't fight what the election results say. Even though in Venezuela, clearly, Maduro's party had won by such a large amount that even with the fake votes that they tried to bring in, it was no doubt that the Venezuelans had defeated the American choice. And now it's your turn, right? When you had an opportunity, stand up for the leftist government of Venezuela, right? And Lula's going to experience the same thing. This is a direct result of, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, even before Vanessa Torres came on, there was the whole scandal of Trump meeting with the president of El Salvador, meeting with Milei, talking about exactly this, how they were going to rig all of these elections in the South American countries and bring it much closer to this Pax Americana. Gone will be the days of dealing with the Russians and the Chinese. All we're going to do is deal with right-wing governments and the Americans, the Pinochetification of South America in an open way. All of these things are connected. And now we're in a position where Petro is forced to acknowledge that this has happened to him and his party has been defeated through this malfeasance that the West continues to do, right? This is a person that says there is no holy land. There's no holy people. Nobody is more sacred in the eyes of God than anyone else. And this is seen as an existential attack on the Israeli way of life. And he has become, he's become target one, but all of the leftists, even the marginal leftist in South America, this is what was going to happen. Because again, the Americans are bringing everything back into their sphere of influence as they prepare to realign for the next conflict, which may happen within 5 years or 50 years. But America's always planning for that, right? And so when that conflict happens with Russia, when that conflict happens with China, they want to make sure the Americas are solidified behind the American hegemonic shield, right? All of those resources are available at any time. All of those governments are available at any time to provide whatever it is the United States economic, financial, or war machine, or even cultural machine needs to achieve victory. Because it's all about always great game politics.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it. This is exactly what's happening in South America. It's what's happening in Cuba. Cuba just passed, I know, a bunch of reforms trying to, find a way to have some sort of sanction relief. We already know that I believe it's the Wall Street Journal. Every 2 weeks, you have some opinion poll about how terrible Claudius Scheinbaum is for Mexico. You get, yeah, obviously we've been covering Nicolas Maduro's abduction and sort of the implementation or the, co-opting or possible co-opting of Delcy, the vice president, now president of Venezuela. Bolivia facing, more upheaval right now, trying to the indigenous population trying to protect Evo Morales. Obviously, huge, socialist, community and history there. Chile also going through their own situation. A few years ago, they were trying to change the constitution. They've now moved more right wing. And you're looking at, obviously Malay is far right wing as you can get. Evil Bilbo down there. They're eating trees. Let them eat
donkey.
Tree.
Let them eat tree.
Yeah.
One of the world's largest beef exporters. This is what happens when you bring libertarians in.
Yeah. Ecuador facing tons of police violence against sort of the darker complected population there. And then, of course, Brazil at any time. I mean, Brazil, you have to think at some point they're done. They're going to move back into a far right wing. I think this is kind of what we were saying and kind of critiquing Lula on. Is like, it doesn't matter how much you try to work with the Americans. Same thing with Delcy. It doesn't really matter how much you try to work with the Americans.
They're here for subjugation, not cooperation.
They need a puppet. They don't need someone that's just, okay, well, you're not that bad. Because at the end of the day, like you said, they want this whole region. They want this whole region wrapped up, and they're kind of tired of being coy about it, And I think that's what the abduction of Maduro was. Obviously, sanctions are very impactful in war in of itself, but it doesn't make the news for some reason here in the United States. And I think let's not forget the boats in the Caribbean still being bombed. So there's absolutely, and again, this goes back to the World War III principle because, war is happening here all over the world in major continents. And I think, like you said, it's going to continue.
I mean, there were boat strikes that continued just literally today.
Wow.
2 people were killed. It left 6 survivors. I mean, what is that, right? Your boat has been blown up in the ocean. So survive. Are you taken prisoner then? Again, these are people that have not been charged with any crimes. These are boats that are out in the ocean that come under fire from the United States Navy, the largest, China's now the largest Navy, but the most proven, capable military Navy in the world. What are you going to do? You're clearly not going to fire back. I mean, that's a hell of a thing. As a person, again, just with our camping, think about the damage to a craft, a vessel, even in something as small as a river, is detrimental. But when you're talking about destroying an ocean-worthy craft in the middle of the ocean, whether they survive the impact or not, if you're not providing assistance, those people are going to die. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolute facts. And of course, we're going to continue to cover that. And again, I just suggest that folks can go check out that Vanessa Torres interview that we had. Also, the Amanda Seals interview that we had. Shout out to Amanda Seals. And again, we appreciate, when people reach out to us and want to talk geopolitics and politics in general. I think that's a really beautiful thing. We're building a larger community. Obviously, our guests and our Instagram platform. And, obviously now the podcast, I think we're at like 260 total. So, I'm just saying we've been spitting facts for like a while, bro. Like maybe like getting close to a decade now. I don't know how much longer. I mean, much longer than that. I'm just talking about in terms of the broadcast. But let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Pocket Cast, so on and so forth. Rate us if you can. It always helps us move up sort of their algorithms. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, leave a comment for the algorithms, and send it to a friend. Hey, you need this. You need these politics. Everyone knows the world is descending further and further into fascism versus socialism, the global South versus the West. And it's important that you keep up to date on this information so you're not just talking nonsense. You know what's happening, and your friends should know what's happening as well. And if you're truly friends, you'll send it to them. That's just my little plug for y'all to go out there, because we want to see this platform grow, because we feel like it's important to talk to the people about these things. InnerCityLeft.com, Fables, Foibles, Other American Sins, Tanky's Book of Poetry. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. What a great and wonderful writer. Buy it in the description. Amin TMK, everywhere you find music. Lil Tanky, everywhere you find music. Patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. If you're a paid subscriber, you're going to see some pictures of our camping / canoeing / firearm training, all those things. And of course, we want you guys to do that as well. And hopefully we'll have Denzel Caldwell on soon, and we'll maybe talk more about that. Tanky, your final thoughts. What did we miss?
War is expensive. Losing
money.
war is even more expensive. And sometimes you just have to know cutting cost is the most cost-effective thing you can do. Just cutting your losses, right? We're already at $120 billion. I'm not even going to keep going with the full amount. It's ridiculous. $120 billion so far has been committed, right, to this Iran debacle. Those costs would balloon if you actually went the Iraq way and dropped 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 American ground forces on. Those costs would balloon. So everybody that's out there wilding out like, oh my God, they're talking about giving the Iranians $300 billion. They would have blew that much sooner if they would have kept the war on. You have two options. We started this shit and it has to stop, because the literal global economy is about to fail. Even the president said this today. Most Americans didn't understand what he told them, but he did tell them the oil reserves were about to run out in 3 to 4 weeks. That's game over. There's no more cutesy, the price went up just a little bit at the pump. No, that's doubling the price, because the government has been subsidizing quietly the price at the pump for the past 2 months, and you didn't know, because even with all the oil they flooded the market with, it wasn't enough to make up for the disruption to the market. And every gallon you spend is a gallon that is less, and there's only so long you can play that game. And they were running up to the end of it. And if the Americans were running out of their strategic reserve, you have to know the Europeans are at a critical place. The Japanese are at a critical place. Philippines, all of those other American allies, they're in nowhere near as good a shape as the Americans as far as their strategic petroleum reserves. And when those run out, it's over. So what's the cost for that? Any price at this point then becomes a deal. You got to know when to walk away. And guess what? They're still not walking away. They're just talking about what we should pay, because this is not over. None of this is resolved. So keep your eyes open and stay frosty.
Yeah, stay frosty and stay froggy. Stay woke. For Amoja Little Tanky Summer, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.